Alright, hopefully we've got all the sound issues worked out. No more echo. Hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. Welcome to our discussion this morning on the CAMP and AMP business rules, and the intent of this morning's meeting is to spend about 30 minutes giving a feedback session with you all, going through a hot wash, and to provide you all with updates based on the great feedback we've received from the field made to the FY15-16 CAMP and 17-21 AMP business rules. Before we get into that, though, we do have a couple discussion items that we hope to briefly touch on this morning. So again, we hope to spend about 30 minutes talking business rule updates. Colonel Meeker is going to discuss the energy program. Mr. Zach Payne is going to go over the FY14 design funds and how you all can get smart and get in the game on getting design funds. Captain Lindsay Maddox is going to discuss troop training projects, and then I'll wrap up by covering Emergent Requirement Request process, changes to the business rules for FY15 and 16, and then we'll briefly touch on minor construction and hopefully use that opportunity to roll into some feedback and questions and answers here towards the end. So getting started, we'll roll right into the significant changes that have been made to the business rules this year based on great feedback that we've received from you all out in the field. One of the more significant items that has been changed based on your feedback has to do with facilities camp guidance. In the original business rules release, you all may recall that component section condition index was what was to be used within the project scoring worksheet to determine each project's probability of failure. However, based on your feedback, and some discussion and debate here, we've determined that it's better to allow the programmers there at the base level to allow you all to determine the condition index level used. And what we mean by that is if you are doing a project that repairs or got an entire system, then you go ahead and use that system condition indice to plug into this project scoring worksheet and determine your probability of failure based on that. Yeah, the only caveat to this, though, is that we're asking that building condition index, that still cannot be used. The bottom line with that is we don't feel that the condition indices put out through the building condition index are accurate enough to use just yet, but that's something that will be improved upon in the future. So again, component section condition index is okay, component condition index is okay, and system condition index is okay. The next update that we've made, we added programming guidance for work spanning several amps. The bottom line is here, you'll use a cost-weighted average of the condition indices of each amp's element within the project. So if you have a utilities component to the project and a facilities component, you'll get a cost-weighted average for the condition indices of the utilities piece, the facilities piece, depending upon each amp's specific programming guidance, and then weight those together to get your probability of failure for that overall project. We also added information in there having to do with programming for a 2-year IPL. We want to foot stomp, again, that the intent is all of your projects for this 2-year FY15 and 16 IPL should be programmed in FY15 unless they absolutely cannot be executed in FY15, in which case go ahead and program those in for FY16. With minor construction, we made an edit to the validation memorandum. The original guidance out there required that the BCE and the wing commander signed off on these validation memorandums. However, after some feedback from you all, we've changed that to require the first 06 within the requesting unit's chain of command and the BCE to sign off on that validation memorandum. And we'll talk about minor construction a little bit more towards the end of this brief. As far as ACE's data entry updates that have been made, originally we asked that the information found in the project scoring worksheet that you entered in that project scoring worksheet be copied and pasted into the description field within ACES. Based on your feedback, we understand that that description field data is utilized to help build the 1391s for your projects, and by copying and pasting that data into this description field, we were making that process more difficult. So we wanted to simplify that, and now we ask that instead of posting that data into the description field, that you post that into the remark section. So again, you're going to take that data that you enter into the project scoring worksheet, copy and paste that into the remark section in ACES instead of the description section. There was a request for sample Big 3 service contract ACES entries to go into the ACES data entry. Since we haven't put those in ACES before, folks wanted to see what those would look like once entered in ACES. So we've added some industrial solid waste management projects into the ACES guide to show what those should look like when they're programmed into ACES. In addition, some minor edits were made to the project scoring worksheet. Those have been unlocked to allow MAGCOMs to go in and add more priorities if they need to. However, we updated this to, instead of reflecting the top 10 priorities, graphing the top 10 priorities, it will now graph the top 25 priorities. The MAGCOM IPL spreadsheet has also been unlocked as well to allow the MAGCOMs and the bases to go in there and sort the IPL lists as they see fit. So those are the primary updates that have been made. There are 31 specific updates that are all listed in the changelog on the CE portal where the business rules are posted. So be sure you go in and check out that changelog and make sure you're up to date on all of the updates that have been made, but these are the most significant. So with that, we're going to roll into Lieutenant Colonel Meeker, who's going to discuss energy program updates.
Morning, folks. Good to see 144 people dialed in here. I thought perhaps you guys would be sick of listening to us talk by now. This is pushing 20 webinars, but thanks for tuning in. Wanted to clear up, again, there's a hot wash. This is all the feedback we've taken from the field. Wanted to clear up something. There's an echo. So get your microphone off, Brandon. All right. I think we've cleaned up the echo. Somebody give me a loud and clear. All righty. One of the things that we've gotten a lot of questions about is the energy program and our transition from the traditional energy focus fund to having these energy projects within a 1-to-N IPL. So obviously I'm not going to rehash exactly what we showed you in the business rules. I think we have a pretty good description there, but I want to touch on, again, some of the basic feedback points and contingent points we brought up. And hopefully we got a lot of energy managers. There was some consternation last week at the Energy PMR, which kind of spurred us to bring this to light. So for FY14, if you're worried about having authority to advertise for projects that you're trying to get ready for the end of year FY14, we're on it. We took that feedback from the Energy PMR. We're working it. We're working it with Fence. We've got a meeting later this week. The piece about the AFICA, the connection with AFICA, we're actually working that. Talking to a squadron commander of one of the AFICA squadrons here. We're working it. Okay, so for FY14, thank you for the feedback. We're working it. For FY15, the business rules at hand here, as you guys all program for your facilities boards to set it up for FY15. Just to rehash, there's a two-pronged approach. I get a lot of folks saying, hey, what if my SIR is greater than 1 and a 1, a 2, and a 3 only gets me 10 points in the model, right, in the risk model. It's only 10 points, and you're saying that energy is still important. Well, folks, there's a two-pronged approach. We're going to have risk, we're going to have energy savings, we're going to have SIR, savings to investment ratio, cost savings embedded in every single project, right? And that extra 10 points on those risk projects. And one of the reasons that we capped it off and maxed it at 1 is we ran a lot of simulations last year with the FY14 IPL. If you've got a big renovation project, you're going to save money. We want you to add sustainable design elements and things like that. We want you to go after cost savings. But if your investment is north of $1 million, that's the denominator on your savings to investment ratio. You're going to have a hard time getting over 1. If you've got a large R&M sustainment, by definition, with that big cost as the denominator, you're not going to get over 1. Not likely. So we used 1 as the max on the risk-based. But don't forget, if you do have a project, regardless of its risk, that's going to save the Air Force a bunch of money and have an SIR over 1, we're going to compete that a little bit separately, right? We're going to have, and we'll talk more about these wedges of SIR savings-only projects that have nothing to do with the risk matrix. We still want to see where they fall in the risk matrix, but those things that are based on savings, not more than they're based on risk, we're going to compete those all separately, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So two-pronged approach, folks. If you find yourself just dwelling on the 10 points, or if you find yourself just dwelling on the SIR, remember, there's 2 ways to slice this thing. Another question we've received a lot is can we use BLCC as the Building Lifecycle Cost tool through Department of Energy that our energy managers and our REMs have always used? That's what our asset visibility team uses. Can you use that? Yes. We encourage you to use that to the utmost. You're gonna get more detailed, more accurate assessments that way. You're probably gonna get higher SIRs with that. So yes, absolutely use BLCC. But as part of our ambitious goal to make energy a part of every project, we wanted to make sure the bases had a maybe you don't have an energy manager, maybe you don't have a REMS, maybe you're one deep and you just can't get all these R&M projects through BLCC because it takes a lot of work. You get all the way down to component level in BLCC. So we wanted to make sure that every base could do this. So we created, in conjunction with the bases and AFIT and a playbook effort, we created a project savings calculator where you can, in your ops engineering element, or wherever you have the talent to do this, use your IWIMS data, your energy data, to calculate savings. It's really cool. We've gotten, if you have feedback on this stuff, we had a captain somewhere that gave us feedback on the back end. It's got a huge back end with OSD cost tables and stuff on the project savings calculator. Gave us feedback, we fixed it. This thing, it's really starting to look good, really starting to work well. And so BLC or project savings calculator, the answer is yes. You can use either. BLCC will help you if you've got time and capacity to do it. If not, we're taking care of you with the project savings calculator. Energy savings versus cost savings. One of the kind of changes in paradigm here, folks, is in the past for the energy program, we've taken cost savings and we've multiplied that times BTU savings, right, to focus on the presidential mandates and things that we have to save energy. And I'm not saying we're not trying to do that, because with this new, even with SIR, if we're going to rack and stack by SIR within BLCC, we're still going to be tracking BDUs to make sure we meet those goals. We're just not, just to simplify it and to baseline everything, we're not going to make that the BTU reduction as part of the equation, right? So SIR is part of the equation, but we do still intend to save energy and meet those mandates. With that said, that's not all we want to save money on, right? That's not all. If we have opportunities that are going to save us a lot in the O&M realm, or in service contracts or some other way, we want to save that money. If you've got a piece of mechanical equipment in a facility that's costing you $100,000 a year to maintain, and the replacement's like $100,000, I want you to find it. I want you to get after it. That's what your HVAC sub-amp working group ought to be working on every day, right? And that project savings calculator is going to make it simple for you to track, calculate, and identify those for us. So yes, we're going to go after energy savings. Yes, we're going to go after cost savings of any kind, and including demo and consolidation would fall in here. So again, the answer to your question is yes. Energy or cost savings? Yes. The answer to the next question, should this be done by the energy managers, the REMs, or the ops engineers? Again, the answer is, guess what? Yes. Right? If nothing else, hopefully the light bulb that has gone on at every CE squadron with respect to these business rules, and we did this on purpose, folks, and if you read the P plan, this is how your squadron is designed. No office in your squadron can do this alone. You can't hand these business rules to your programmers. You can't hand these energy rules to your energy managers. You can't do it. You won't survive that way. This has got to be a team effort built around sub-amp and amp working groups. And obviously, if you're in a leadership position in your squadron, you're looking for those right skill sets to plug in for these different efforts. So in the P plan, you read it. The ops engineering section is supposed to be the hub for a lot of this cost savings and the vision here, and I've heard this term all the way from the top, is these ops engineer folks all the way down to your airmen, senior airmen, 3E6s are supposed to grow into like mini industrial engineers, right? That take on a lot of these calculations and energy savings, with the ultimate goal of who's the best person in the squadron to find all of your inefficient motors on base or all of your inefficient lighting things on base. Probably your electricians who are out there every day, and your mechanic and your HVAC guys who are out there every day. We're trying to drive that ingrainment into your daily process and that teamwork across the squadron. So the answer is yes. SharePoint tracking and validation. Now, I want to clear something up. AFCEC CN, our energy partners over in Tyndall, as part of AFCEC, they're still going to go through some very, very diligent validation of this. We've given you clear guidance in the business rules on where to post this stuff for validation. In PDF, one file PDF with your project savings calculator, your BLCC, anything you've got to help us validate, throw it in there. It'll save us time later. But we're going to go through one by one. Anything with an SIR over 1, we're going to dig into those records, folks, and we're going to validate them. And if we have questions, we're going to call you. And yes, one big question we keep getting, hey, the project savings calculator asks you to get into IWIMS, right? So my example with the mechanical equipment that's costing you $100,000 to maintain, we're going to look in IWIMS And the 491 shop code, that HVAC shop code where you said you spent $100,000 there last year, we're going to get into IWIMS and we're going to look at that. We absolutely are. So if it's fuzzy, if we have questions, we're going to call you. We're going to validate all these, folks. And then lastly, this is one of the big things that people have accused us of this is too fuzzy and it's a black box. I'm going to lay this out for you pretty clearly here. So I've told you that aside from the risk matrix and the extra 10 points, we're going to have savings-only wedges that we're going to insert into the IPL. We're going to insert them into the one-to-end list, like the example here in the bottom right of my slide. Right? We're going to take everything with an SIR between 2 and 4, for example, and roll that up to a $4.1 million line item that we insert into the IPL. Then we're going to do more R&M, we're going to do more sustainment, we're going to do more environmental, and then later on in the IPL, we're going to slide in savings tier 2 with anything of an SIR between 1 and 2. And that's how we're going to balance risk versus return on investment. And so everybody's asking me, how are you going to put them in? Where are you going to put them in the IPL? This sounds like you guys are just coming up with this, winging this. Hey, so here's my, I want to forget about energy for a second. Everybody put your CE hat on, your big CE hat on. And maybe this is just an ops flight hat. I'm trying to say this as many ways as I can, use as many analogies as I can. But if you're a squadron commander, if you're a deputy BCE, if you're a ops flight commander, if you're somebody, a resources person in your squadron at base X, let's say the operations group commander comes to you right now and says, hey folks, for FY15, I'm the operations group commander. We got a lot of important stuff. I'm really important. You can't deny that. How much money and time, how much work order supply are you going to give me in FY15? How much, BCE, for my stuff? How much, Ops Chief, for my stuff? How much money are you going to give me next year? Where are you going to place my stuff in your priority list for FY15? What's your first question? What's your number one question? Somebody type me in. Come on, field. Somebody answer my question. The most important colonel, the most important mission on the base comes to you and says, hey, how much money am I going to get next year? How much work order supply? Where are all my work orders going to be in your priorities for FY15? How much money are you going to give me next year? What's the first question you ask? Civil Engineer 101. It's the first thing they teach you when you show up at a CE squadron. Come on, Jim Martin, I saw you wanted to answer. Somebody answer me. Joker, you out there? Major Joker and a half and I walked through this the other day, and he gave the perfect answer right on the spot. I got 150 people, and nobody wants to talk with me. Come on, guys. What's the first question you ask? How much money am I going to get next year for my stuff? All right, we'll be here all day. The first question is, what's the requirement? What's the requirement? Ops group. I'm not going to just set aside $1 million worth of work order supply for you, or $100,000 worth of work order supply for you. What's the requirement? What are your work orders? What do you need? What's the requirement? And so if you're out there in the energy world or as a manager come and say, how big are these wedges going to be? Where are they going to go in the IPL? My answer to you is, what's the requirement? Guys, if we have $200 million worth of SIRs over 7, which I know that's not realistic, you're going to get $200 million at the top of the IPL. What's the requirement? So if you're an energy manager thinking, oh no, the sky's falling, oh no, the focus fund has gone away, the money's drying up, AFCEC's got this black box process and they're talking about wedges, that's just like a focus fund anyways. No. What's the requirement? If you're sitting out there and you're an energy manager, you're an ops engineer, and you want to be competitive in this process, go find them. Go find inefficiencies, go find cost savings, go find good SIRs, and if you bring good requirements to the table, they'll get racked and stacked and you will get money. All right, off my soapbox. Brennan, back to you.
All right, now we have Mr. Zach Payne to talk FY14 design.
All right, good morning, folks, or good afternoon for those on USAFE. I broke up design. We've had some questions on it. I've broken up into 2 phases just to make it a little clearer for you. So basically in the business rules, it talks about a 1 March data pull. So our whole intent there is to basically get started on our FY15 construction projects that need design now versus waiting for the IPPLs to be approved. So the business rules say in there that we're going to identify the high priority requirements, and what we're defining in the business rules as high priority is a requirement with a probability of failure of 80 or more based on our condition assessment, and an MDI of 80 or more versus a COF. Some people might ask why not COF. Well, we don't have MAJCOM priorities yet, so we're going to do it based on MDI. And we've then done some preliminary analysis of this, and we think that anything that's scoring that well in those two categories should score well in the final IPPL, so we're willing to take a little risk by issuing dollars and authority to advertise to go get those designs going. So we're going to pull that data on 1 March. So the key for the folks at the base is to make sure that you have a POF in there and to make sure that your CAD code and everything's in ACES, which it should be, so we can identify the MDI. Next step, we're going to validate those requirements with the MAJCOMs based on that data poll throughout March. And once we get the green light from the MAJCOMs, we're going to go ahead and issue authority and issue design funds. So that is basically to capture FY15 construction projects that need design. And are high priority, not at risk of being close to the line. So phase 2, once the AFCAMPs are submitted to AFCEC on 15 May, we're going to do a similar process. We're going to have a preliminary AFCAMP based on the 15 construction and what we know in terms of the PB and what we expect to get for the centralized program. And we're going to identify all those requirements that are tentatively above the line that have a design tail requested in ACES. And we're going to go through the same process, going to validate them that, yep, we still need design for those, and we're going to issue authority and funds for those designs then. Like I said, the dates there, 2 June to validate and 16 June to issue funds. And that is funds for that 15 designs so that we can get it awarded. Understand that we're a little late, and those projects may not be ready to execute early in FY15 for the construction tail, but we're all right with that. Finally, we're also going to identify what's basically below the 15 tentative program as our 16 program, and we're going to identify the design tail there as well and look to issue authority for end-of-year fallout. And so basically our end-of-year program will consist of 15 projects that are construction only and 16 design projects based on this data pool. And we're going to take both of those, we're going to issue ATA on them so that they can get out on the street, and if we're lucky, we'll get a buy down some of those requirements into year. Otherwise, they'll roll over into the new year as funded requirements. So hopefully that clears it up a little better, but the key dates, 1 March is what we're looking for, those high priority stuff. So if you're at the base doing your inspections to go develop POFs, focus on those high priority facilities first so that we can make sure that we get the design requirement captured. Oh, I got one more slide. Sorry about that. So this is a shot from ACES, and these are the key fields that we're looking at specifically right now. Estimated AE costs. That's the field that we're going to look at when you ask for design dollars. We're going to look at that as the how much you need. You need to make sure you mark Fund Indicator D in the design drop down there so that we know that design funds are requested. That's going to be one of the parameters in our Discover report when we pull it. And then you're going to update the fiscal year that the design funds are required in. Again, straight screenshot from ACES. Thanks for the example, Vandenberg. But any questions on that, please let us know. Thanks. More questions?
All right, and next up, we've got Lindsay Maddox, Captain Lindsay Maddox, to talk troop training projects. Let's keep the questions rolling. We'll be sure to address those at the end.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm actually kind of filling in for Captain Joshua, who wasn't able to make it today. So I'll give you a quick overview, and then we might do a deeper dive at a later date. All right, am I still echoing, or is it better now? Okay, I'm going to keep pressing. Okay, so for those of you that aren't familiar with the troop training program or troop training project, our contingency engineering units like Red Horse, CTS, PRTC all have annual training requirements that they have to accomplish when they're not deployed to maintain their skill set, and they usually do this through troop training projects. Now, historically, prior to centralization, These troop training projects were funded by MATCOM or even by the installation where the work was being done. When we began to centralize the R&M budget, FY14 in particular, the troop training costs were basically taken straight off the top. We identified a bunch of projects, called them level 0, made them essentially must-fund items. And so this year, our goal hasn't changed too much, but we're trying to improve on that process. So in FY14, the intent was for everybody to, or for Red Horse, CTS, PRTC, to go ahead and select their troop training projects off of the draft IPL from projects that were above the fund line. It didn't work quite as well as planned because most of those projects that were above the fund line were too large in scope and they didn't fit the unique training requirements of these units. For example, Red Horse has to do wells and case stands, and you don't see a lot of those projects high on the IPL. So for FY15-16, our goal is the same. We still want our contingency units to pick their projects from the IPL above the fund line, but we've instituted a couple of new measures that we hope will encourage more installations to volunteer their projects and also to raise project scores to keep them competitive on the IPL. So the first thing that we're going to do this year in order to get more projects identified and volunteered for troop training is we're going to allow the installation to claim the estimated savings of a troop training project as a rebate, which will increase the SIR. So historically, Red Horse, CTS, those guys can accomplish a project for about 80% of what the typical PA would be. So we're going to allow the installation to program that 20% as a rebate and increase the SIR, get a couple of bonus points, and hopefully drive your project a little bit further up the IPL and above the fund line. Now, because we're still not entirely sure that we're going to have a ton of requirements above the fund line that meet those TTP needs, we might have to go below the fund line just like we did in FY14. And if we do, we're still going to be looking for those projects that installations have volunteered as a TTP and claimed that potential cost saving. So even if your project is below the fund line, if you have volunteered it as a TTP, there's still a good chance that it's going to get done. Okay, so two benefits for the installation to volunteer their project. Number one, you're going to get some cost savings to increase your SIR, hopefully get you above the fund line. Number two, even if you're not above the fund line, you might still get your project done. Okay, so now the next question is, how do I submit a project for TTP consideration? The first thing that you should do is read in the business rules. There's a whole section devoted to TTPs. And there's also an addendum that Red Horse has sent us and we tacked on to in Appendix Appendix G of the business rules. And that's a list of the requirements that they have for troop training each year. So you can take a look at that list and identify whether or not your project at your base will meet one of those needs. If you think that it might, you're going to email us here at AFCEC CPAD, and our address is right there. CC your MATCOM programmers so that you keep them in the loop and they know what's going on. And basically just give us all your project basics. So include your project title, number, description, any special details that you think Red Horse or CTS PRTC would want to know, and then also a point of contact at your installation. Here at AFCEC, we're going to go ahead and log that and kind of keep track of the projects that have been submitted, and then we're going to forward it to the proper POC at that contingency construction unit, who's then going to contact you to try and validate whether or not that project will really work and meets their training needs. If they do confirm that it's an eligible TTP and that it would be a good project, then you can go ahead and program it into ACES, including that 20% savings in your SIR. So after we have that whole list of projects that have been submitted and validated as TTPs, and we have the draft IPL, the selection process will begin. Now, when those units go to select which projects they're actually going to do, the first place they're going to look is above the fund line for projects that have been submitted to them and validated prior to IPL creation. Okay, so if you are number one on that list and you're the highest scoring project, they're going to pick you off right off the top. If we don't have enough above the fund line that have been validated, Next, they're just going to take a look at everything above the fund line and see if there's anything there that they missed or that wasn't submitted, and then they can contact the base or the MAGCOM and see if they would be willing to let them do that project. If they still aren't able to meet all of their training requirements using projects above the fund line, now they're going to start to dip below the fund line and look for those things that have been submitted and validated with them prior to IPL creation. Okay, and we think that there's a reasonable chance that that's going to happen just because of the types of projects we've seen in the past. So again, if you're not sure your project's going to make it above the fund line and you think Red Horse or CTS could do it, go ahead and submit it as a TTP, and you definitely increase your odds of getting that work done. And I think that sums it up for me, so I'll pass it back to Captain Howell.
All right. Going to talk emergent requirements with you guys real quick. One of the most important things we wanted to do this year as far as emergent requirements are concerned, FY15-16 and applying to FY14, was clarifying and refining the definition of emergent requirements. An emergent requirement being any requirement that comes up after current year of execution IPL is approved. And so we've broken that definition down to basically say that an emergent requirement has to be critical and unforeseen. And what we mean by critical is that mission degradation or impact is imminent, and we further back that up by now requiring emergent requirements to be ready to advertise within 45 days of a request submission. And then by unforeseen, we mean that project or that requirement could not have been reasonably planned for or predicted given existing circumstances. And those are definitions pulled almost directly out of the business rules. So critical and unforeseen, two big foot-stomping points there with emergent requirements. And we'll be looking closely at those as we validate your submissions. There's two types of submissions. There's an urgent request and a routine request. An urgent request equaling danger to life, health, safety, or mission failure, underlying failure there. And an urgent request typically means that you need approval, authority to advertise in less than 30 days. Routine, all other requirements, imminent mission impact or violation of environmental laws on the EQ side of the house, and those are 30 to 90-day requirements for approval and authority to advertise. So again, critical, unforeseen, and then two types of requests, urgent and routine. Once we get these in, they'll go through a scoring and validation process. Because we're still operating off of the FY14 model for this year, the technical score of that requirement is given 20 points to supplement MAGCOM priority, because these are submitted after the IPL is approved and therefore don't receive a MAGCOM priority. So 20 points. To update along with a new model for FY15 and 16 emergent requirements will receive an additional 40 points, max MAGCOM priority points, in addition to their tech score. And then if these are approved, once submitted, they'll be inserted into the IPL based on that tech score plus that 20 points for FY14 or 40 points for FY15. The approval threshold for emergent requirements still remains at $100,000. What that means is that AFCEC CP, Colonel Davey here, is the final signature authority on all emergent requirements under $100,000. EQ requirements still are reviewed by AFCEC CZ, the environmental side of our house here, and validate those requirements and then pass those on to us for final signature. All requirements over $100,000, whether they're EQ or R&M, go through AFCEC still for validation and scoring, but are signed off ultimately by Major General Carter. I want to talk to you guys and show you guys real quick our new streamlined SharePoint. But before I go into this, the intent of this SharePoint I want to foot stomp is for the MAGCOMs or on the environmental side of the house, the RSTs, to be able to submit their emergent requirement requests. The bases can utilize this SharePoint site to track where their emergent requirement requests are. So as you can see, this is the home page. The link is in the business rules. You can also navigate to this home page from the P&I SharePoint site. There's a link at the top. You see all your active emergent requests. These are actual real-time emergent requests that have been submitted thus far, and those that have been completed and what their status is. We tried to make this as simple as possible. So on the right-hand side, you have 3 buttons. You can click the Submit an Emergent Requirement button. If you're unfamiliar with the business rules, we've consolidated the Emergent Requirement Only business rules into this tab. We're going to submit a requirement. You'll get a little window here. You'll fill out the required data. Again, keep in mind those urgent versus routine differences in requests when filling out the date here at the bottom. You'll type in the required information and click Save, and what that does is it automatically generates one of these Emergent Requirement Request sites. For those of you who are familiar with the EPR and OPR tracking system that I've seen used some bases on SharePoint, we tried to model this after that. We'll open up one of these sites here. You'll see you have required document templates here at the top. We require an Emergent Requirement Validation Worksheet and a request memorandum. If it's under $100,000, that request memorandum must be signed by the MAGCOM A7. On the environmental side of the house, it's the requesting VCE. If it's over $100,000, then the environmental side of the house, AFCEC CZ will sign it. If it's R&M, then the MAGCOM A7, or I'm sorry, the MAGCOM CV will be required to sign it and submit that request to General Carter. If you have supporting documents, 1391's photos, those can be uploaded here. And then we will upload our response documents once we've made a recommendation into this section here. Once you've uploaded the required documents, come down here to the task list. You'll click Edit Item and then Mark Complete and type in any comments that you have here. So again, we tried to make this as simple as possible. These task lists are auto-generated based on the program you picked for your emergent requirement. And this way you can keep an eye on where it's at in the process. In the interest of transparency. So I believe that is it for our emergent requirements piece. Let's go back to the slideshow here. And now we'll talk a little bit about minor construction and hopefully lead into some feedback and questions and answers. So the intent here is to discuss the rules on minor construction as they are within the current business rules. And then we kind of want to bring up a few examples that we've been discussing here. They've been brought to our attention, and we're curious to know what you all think makes sense as far as minor construction is concerned. As the rules are right now, we've broken minor construction out into essentially two components. There's repair projects that include minor construction, and then there's standalone minor construction requirements. So for repair projects including minor construction, this equation is pulled straight out of the business rules, but the bottom line is you're going to take that repair portion of the project's probability of failure and cost, weight average that with the minor construction portion receiving 100 points for probability of failure, max probability of failure points, and getting a weighted average probability of failure for that project based on those numbers. Your consequence of failure will be that asset's MDI and the MAGCOM priority, no difference from the other AMP business rules. An example that we've heard of something with repair and minor construction might be a facility requiring an HVAC lighting system upgrade along with an expansion to support new flight simulators as an example of that. For standalone minor construction, we have one additional step right now, and that is a validation memorandum in which we require the first 06 in the requesting units chain and the base civil engineer to sign off on this requirement as one, being mission critical, and two, the scope of work meets the minimum required to support this requirement. Consequence of failure will be that intended assets MDI plus MAGCOM priority, and probability of failure will equal 100. There's been some discussion on, we're looking forward to the feedback on this with several projects. We've got some examples here at the bottom, a fence required around a math facility and the expansion of parking in which this max probability of failure points are bumping them to the top of folks' lists. However, our original intent is that consequence of failure is meant to be the balancing factor within this. We've also been tossing around discussion about creating a matrix similar to our builder matrix, our red, yellow, green matrix that will break these minor construction components out into separate fields in which, or separate tiers in which BCs and requesting units can break these out into point ranges instead of just an automatic probability of failure equaling 100. So we're kind of interested to hear y'all's feedback on that. And with that, we'll open it up to questions and feedback and comments, and feel free to talk about or ask questions on minor construction stuff.
So the first question that we haven't answered in the chat box is with reference with respect to the savings only projects, and how is this not a focus fund?
All right, this question was asked by one of my favorite people. This is Colonel Meeker, by one of my favorite people in all of CE, Jim Martin at AFMC. Nobody works harder. We talk twice a week, and I love it because he's smart and he argues with me and asks me all sorts of hard questions and challenges us. We love smart people who call here and challenge us and then are committed to making it better. And one of the things, Jim and I give each other a lot of grief. So Jim asked this question: how can you say that these wedges, these SIR wedges, how can you say this isn't a focus fund? And so I know I can say with a loving heart to my friend Jim Martin, if you think that this is a focus fund, you've got your head in the sand. You're missing the whole point, folks. A focus fund is when Air Force leadership takes a big chunk of money and sets it off to the side. Says, this big chunk of money, regardless of anything else going on, this big chunk of money, we're going to focus these funds on a specific topic. We're going to focus them on dorms. We're going to focus them on energy. Regardless of what the requirements are, regardless of any other competing requirements, we're going to set these aside. We're going to focus these funds on one specific area. What we're doing now is the exact opposite. 180 degrees in the different directions. We're saying, show us your requirements, Air Force. Show us your savings requirements. And if you have good requirements that can be articulated, validated, and objectively scored with industry-leading savings to investment ratio processes, then you'll get money. If y'all bring us nothing with an SIR over 1, guess how much money is going to go to energy this year? None. Zero. Well, I'm sure there's some folks that are half freaking out about that right now, but it's not going to play well, and we'll have to have a hard conversation about, hey, do we really need to fund this stuff? Right? That is the exact opposite of a focus fund. A focus fund is when you set up a pot of money, and regardless of the requirements, you throw money at something. This is the exact opposite. There's no money set aside. We're going to objectively rack and stack requirements and then fund based on that objective prioritization. With respect, and the other piece that makes it an anti-focus fund is that energy requirements have to compete against all other requirements. That's the point of the 1-to-N IPL, guys. This is the anti-focus fund. This is, some people say, oh, that's semantics, that's a sales pitch. No, this is technically and literally by definition the opposite of a focus fund. Requirements relative to all other requirements drive who gets the next dollar. The exact opposite of saying, hey, we got a big pot of money, let's throw money at something, regardless of the requirements. Exact opposite. Hopefully I don't need to argue with anybody about that anymore. If you think this is a focus fund, you're missing the boat. You're missing the point. Call me, Jim. I love you. Jim Martin at AFMC. Good question, buddy. He might have done that just to hear me get a little bit worked up there. There's a distinct possibility he asked that for that reason. Yeah, we had a bunch more energy questions. I'll roll through while I'm talking here. Let's see here. Great question from Gary Moore at USAFE. With the FY14 NRG listings, PEC 7.6 and 7.8 were considered for funding. If a project in the FY15-16 program has an SIR above 1, but is less than $5 million in sustainment, can we still compete it on the IPL for that based on its SIR? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you've got an SIR of 6 and it's a $100,000 project, I'll want it. I want everything with an SIR over 1. I want to save money. I want to save energy. And let's say guest 10, this is the Ramstein Energy Manager, asked a really good question too. It says a wing commander is looking at his high mission risk requirements and typically is going to have his top 10 spoken for before he gets to just savings money. So do I need to push, or can I just get a program a higher SIR? We think, and we've thought a lot about this and about how you will present these things to your wing commanders and your facilities boards. And hence, I'm going to reference our commander's prospectus. So if you're an energy manager, maybe you haven't seen the commander's prospectus that we've teed up for your facilities board use. The top of the list has gotten all of the focus. There's a risk matrix on there and his top 10 risk projects with some place for him to justify those. But on that same sheet, on the front page of this thing that the wing commander is going to sign, gives you an opportunity to show him your top 5 savings projects. So A, they're going to be visible. B, those things that are based on SIR alone, if you're an energy manager and you got a good like traditional NRG kind of project, it's going to save, it's got a high SIR, save a lot of money. That doesn't require wing commander prioritization. These ones that are based strictly on their SIR and aren't going to be looked at for a wing, those aren't going to get a wing commander priority. They're going to base those wedges I'm talking about, the anti-focus fund, where you send me requirements, we're going to put them in depending on how good your requirements are. Those don't require wing commander priority. So my answer is twofold. A, they're going to get wing commander visibility, and we hope that your wing commanders are going to advocate for things that are going to save money. And we hope that that drives a really healthy dialogue at your facilities board saying, wow, we're going to save money. Wow, we were spending $200,000 on something that we can fix for $200,000. Way to go, guys. And then B, it doesn't require prioritization, right? We want him to prioritize mission risk, have visibility of those efficiencies, and when it gets to our level and the corporate level, we'll try to come up with the right balance between risk, mission risk, and return on investment. Great question, Ramstein. There was another one from Air Force Global Strike, wasn't there? Oh, it's the pavements one. So Global Strike, I asked him for a follow-up here. Did he give me more information? So the Global Strike folks asked, where'd it go? If you can provide a defendable SIR greater than 1 for a pavement sustainment project, it will compete for the savings-only wedge. So this is a great question. So we've had lots of smart folks out there thinking, okay, I got this risk project. And boy, it's going to score like 160. I don't know where the cut line's going to be. I don't know if that's going to compete well enough, but it's got an SIR of 4. I wonder if it would be beneficial to me, instead of competing it for risk, to compete it for the savings-only piece. My answer to you is, if it's we're going to look at both. Right, we're going to look at all 3 data points: probability, consequence, and savings to investment ratio. And we've asked in that other cost tab in ACES for you to give us those 3 things. So my answer is we're going to look at both. And then the question is, okay, so should my wing commander waste a priority bullet on it, right? Because you guys are going to all try to figure out how to maximize those priority points we give you. Should I ask my installation commander to waste a prioritization point on it? And because maybe it'll get funded for SIR. It's got a big SIR. Maybe. Probably if it's a really high SIR, but if it's important to your mission, I mean, if it's an airfield project, it's going to score well anyways. If it's important to that wing commander's mission, he needs to prioritize it as important to his mission, right? Hopefully those wing commander prioritizations and MAGCOM prioritizations aren't looked at, figure how to use those to game the system. Hopefully you use those to say, hey, here's what's important to the mission. We need that ground truth. And then the other element of that question, I asked for more detail. I don't think I got it. The other element might be the fact that it's a pavement project and how to do SIR in a pavement project. If you missed the TNAP AMP webinar, a lot of airfield pavement stuff in there. There's a recording on YouTube with a link on our portal page. George Van Steenberg, the Air Force's pavement expert, and our AMP manager Brian Lee went through SIR for pavements, and they've come up with a really cool way to do it. They're actually recoding paver software to do this for us. It's really awesome. So pavements, SIR, heck yeah, let's get after that. Is that all on energy?
One more what if one of the bundled savings projects is not ready to execute, but hold up execution of the entire bundle?
Oh, good question. So one of the key things, I don't want to commit too much here because without our resources folks sitting next to me, we'll have to work through it. These wedges, these bundled. So if we have a $20 million, everything with SIR between 4 and 5. That might be 100 line items, right? So how are we going to move the money, and how are we going to execute 100, potentially small, big combination of different PEC line items? Quite honestly, we're going to have to kind of work on that as those requirements come in. So a couple of things that we envision is if the asset visibility team has come to your base and identified, or your REMs have identified a lot of stuff like relamping and replace motors and a lot of little stuff that's really work order supply. We expect to push, 7, 8 PEC, $67,000 with that line item list attached to it. What was the exact question? Am I deviating from the question, Zach?
No, it just says if a project in the tier is not ready to execute.
Oh, if it's not ready to execute,
will it
hold
up the rest?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And no, so let's talk about our process right now. Says we don't move to the next thing on the YPL until we've executed the one above it, right, until we get to the end of the year and we just got to spend money. We're working on that, folks. To answer your question, no. Those bundles won't be treated like that. We want to get those ready to execute and go, and we're not going to hold up 99 projects because one's not ready. And without saying too much, we're working hard here with Fence on our plan for the future and how to march down that IPL and meet our obligation rates and all that stuff. So more to come on that. Here's another energy savings one. Major Jokin asked, for manpower savings, is our standard shop rate going to be used? This will simplify validation. Yes, you're going to use the data from IWIMS, which has all that shop rate, man hour, labor, material stuff all in the back end of it. Right? An hour of HVAC time for $55 an hour. So yeah, that's standard ops business that your ops engineers should be all over.
The next question there was about conjunctive funding, but just in general, the business rules we think are going to, companion type projects are going to compete well. So NATO is one type of companion potentially, but say NAV companion, and it's essentially basically what is the companion bringing to the table, like a $5 million AFES facility, and we have a $100,000 tail to extend utilities. The formula in the business rules gives that a very high SIR, so we anticipate those companion projects will float to the top so that we can address them and make sure that we have visibility on them at all levels.
Okay, so there was a quick question regarding the TTP projects, and if something was submitted as a TTP and validated, and then they programmed it, including that 20% rebate in their SIR, if they are not selected, the question was, will they have to reprogram their SIR afterwards, or basically, will we take that savings away if they don't get selected as a GTP? Right now, our answer to that question is no. They will be able to keep that 20% savings programmed in the SIR. And the reason for that, there's a couple of them. Number one, that 20% savings is an incentive for us to get more projects. So it's kind of a little bonus that you guys get for submitting your project as a potential TTP and saying, Red Horse BTS, take this on. We would love to help you meet your training requirements. Number two, we anticipate that most of those projects that are going to be validated and approved by Red Horse, BTS, and PRTC will most likely be below the fund line. Okay, because like I said, things that we see above the fund line are usually very large scope projects that don't need any help getting those extra points, and then B, once they're above the fund line, don't really want one of the contingency units doing it. So the projects that we're expecting to see really take advantage of this the most are going to be below the fund line, in which case that 1 or 2 extra points is not going to be a big deal. And then the third reason is, remember that the only people that get to claim that 20% savings are going to be people that are installations and projects that have been validated by Red Horse, PTS, and PRTC. If we've already been overwhelmed with a ton of projects, and it looks like we have more than enough for Red Horse and CTS and PRTC and everybody to do, they're going to stop validating. They're going to stop approving. So really, get your project in sooner rather than later if you think you have a good potential project for our contingency construction guys to do. Because at some point, if we get enough, they will stop saying yes. And then we will reserve the right, if we do just have a crazy flood of projects, maybe we'll need to take another look at that policy. But for right now, no, we will not take that cost savings away if your project is not selected as a TTP.
So we had a good question about minor construction, and I know Captain Howell talked about this a minute ago. I'll kind of weigh in with some expectation management here. So, and listen, I hope if nothing else, I know we pushed out a lot of information. We've asked you all to meet some timelines, made a big change with a short timeline. And we get that, and we hope that, if nothing else, you understand that we're taking your feedback, we're trying to make things better, try to communicate with you. And with that said, I'll be honest, the minor construction thing, we struggled on how to roll that into this. We worked with a lot of our MatchCom partners on how to roll minor construction in. We did the best. We were on a tight timeline too, because we knew that the more time we wasted trying to make this perfect, the less time you had to get her done. And so we came to a point with minor construction where we said, you know what, keep it simple, roll it out. And when we did that, we wanted to make sure we hit some key objectives, and two, we understood that we were going to need to listen to y'all and make this better as we go. So what were those things that when we rolled out minor construction with this idea that we want, first 06 and the mission stakeholder chain of command to sign it and the BCE to sign it, we said, here's what we don't want to do. We don't want to put a process out that cuts off the BCE's legs with respect to planning. We don't want minor construction to be something this is why minor construction you can't submit as an emergent. Right? Because I don't want you at the base to have to deal with the ops group coming to you and saying, hey, the flight simulator showed up. Where's the electricians to hook them up? And you find out you've got like $200,000 worth of work to do. How often does that happen? A lot, right? We want that process to include the mission owners up front to make sure that they put in their work orders and that planning is done and their 30/80 money's committed for the flight simulators or whatever. So that was our intent by rolling that together and to keep it simple. And again, we're listening, and we know it's not perfect. And the specific question is asked is a 1391 not good enough? Well, the reason I just gave you, that's why we wanted to have that mission owner signature. Is the worst thing that we can do from here is do something that cuts your legs off. Our job, everything we do, and I told you we're talking with Fence right now about some of the execution stuff. The way we look at it is everything we do is to give you leverage on your base to get your job done, to help you present objective risk to your wing commander, to help you highlight those opportunities, to help you plan these kind of minor construction things with your customers. So we kept it, way too simple. So some of the things we're talking about as lessons learned is we still like that mission owner signature until we, if it's an upgrade for the sake of equipment or whatever. But we've had some examples come in like, hey, our manning went up and we need to double the size of our parking lot. And the folks at the MatchCom are saying, holy cow, that shouldn't get 100 for probability of failure just because it's minor construction and the customer says they need twice the amount of parking. And so one of the things that we're looking at is potentially, so not just everything's important max points, is teeing up some definitions for that, because I think that this particular one was a CE parking lot, and where the mission support group commander would theoretically have to say, hey, this is mission critical, deserves 100 points. Well, maybe there's some options like mission critical, no workarounds, 100 points, or kind of mission important and no workarounds, 80 points, or it's important but there's like 3 workarounds because they could just park across the street, 60 points. But our debate now is, and I'm totally just speaking off the cuff, honest with y'all, because we think this is a collaboration. If we start rolling out a new matrix now, it'll probably be better. But I bet some of you have already had your facilities boards. When we are sensitive to the fact that every time we push changes, you all have to figure them out and you all have to recommunicate at your level. So minor construction, there's opportunities to make this better. There's another thing with the security forces kind of stuff. For my USAFE friends are pushing us some examples from security forces. We can't have every vehicle barrier and fence and T-wall be 100 points. We refuse to do it. We've got to figure out a way to make the installation defense stuff play better in probability of failure. But again, we could push that out, get it together and push it out next week. We've actually got some pretty good ideas put together, but now you guys have to adjust fire. So you guys let me know. How late's too late? Do you want us to adjust fire? And with that said, we'll give you flexibility. If you've got a case-by-case where you say, hey, this parking lot's scoring too high, the probability should be 60, not 100, call us. Let's make it 60. You know what? Let's do it. All of this is a starting point for good engineering judgment, right? For good investment decision making. Our math ain't going to be perfect. Our algorithm ain't going to be perfect. We know it. Call us. Global strike on I think that was global strike on the parking lot. Call us. Let's make it something less than 100, right? Because that totally, the parking lot thing, that doesn't pass the common sense test. All right, next. Are we done? Okay, so to clarify one thing from Global Strike, we think this is Brian Carr. Is he the AMCAMP manager? A pavement joint seal project will have an MDI of 95, but the SMS PCI of 90, which gives you a CI of around 10. Since pavement has a life cycle of 30 plus years, the wing priority is going to focus on the worst first. Joint seal is not a priority, but its potential for savings is high. We just need to be able to prove it. That's really technical. I would think that a joint seal project that's going to save you money over the long run is something we absolutely want to get after. And I know the pavements team, along with all the MAGCOM pavement folks and our pavement folks at AFCEC, have been working hard on SIR for pavements. I'll leave it at that. Go watch the TNAP webinar, or call George Van Steenberg, or send us an email. If that doesn't answer your question about pavement SIR, let us know. And I can tell you again, if it's not perfect now, we're really working hard on pavements SIR. And things like joint sealing that we as engineers know make us money. We know that saves us money, and we want to be able to objectively capture that. So Brian, if we don't have a solution for this, we want to get after it. And so maybe that's homework for us. We got to figure out. What else? So we had 127 people stick with us to an hour and 7 minutes. Guess 10. This was the Ramstein Energy Manager, correct? Okay, great question, Ramstein. He asked for the savings only projects, right? For the SIR, for the anti-focus fund. I'm going to keep calling it that. Do I have to have a builder assessment? I'm looking at my team here, the folks who did a lot of work on this, and we actually debated this quite a bit, which is why I had to look at them and see where we ended up, because there's pros and cons to each approach. The answer in the business rules is yes. If you have a project to save money, every project we want POF, COF, SIR. Now, hopefully, this becomes a reasonable request in such that if you're going to go in, especially if you're using VLCC and you're going to get down to the component level, I mean, you've actually got to go put eyes on motors and compressors and all those little things. Yeah, capture that in Builder for us, please. And that'll give us a complete picture. The ops, and so Ramstein, that's interesting. They've got an ops squadron. I'm reading this whole question here. They've got an ops squadron, and the energy folks aren't necessarily in that ops squadron. So it's one more barrier to communication that we've got to break that down. And they're working hard on our deadline to meet the wing commander's needs. And they may not have time to get to POF, COF, right? Because they're going to be so. The energy manager could come up with. We want them to come up with a whole bunch of SIRs. And the ops flight might not have time to catch up.
Really, the reason we wanted COF, and SIR is because you want to see if it's going to score better as a risk-based or an SIR.
Yeah.
If they know it's going to be a savings project, it wouldn't be the end of the risk.
So this is something, as you can tell, we're sitting here talking in public about it. Again, we're totally open to this feedback, and we want to make things better. We love when smart people challenge us like this. So Ramstein got it. Let us talk about this. I would say don't let that become an obstacle to you getting some good SIRs. Don't let it become an obstacle. And what we may do is build it on that SIR and give you a chance to go back after and get the builder. I want that to be case by case. We try to eliminate any excuses or loopholes in going to do our builder work. We really want to build that foundation. So I would say two things. I would say don't let that slow you down. Get us some good SIRs. And two, I don't know if you can figure out BLCC. I mean, builder is going to be like, you're going to be able to do it with your eyes closed. BLCC is a lot harder than builder. And so if you're looking at motors and compressors and different things, maybe you can figure out how to get assessor rights and go into building 10 HVAC chiller or whatever it is and code it based on your analysis that you're already doing in BLCC. Just an idea. Work with your folks as much as you can, but I completely understand that concern, and I don't want that to keep you all from finding good SIRs. So do BLCC, do the SIRs. put it on the builder priority, the priority list of the ops squadron to do the builder. And if they don't get there, we'll see. We'll see how that goes, and maybe that's something we get to later. My team, hopefully, I saw some winces and some head nods. So we'll try to follow up on that with some more rock solid answers. Who asked that? Air Mobility Command? That's a great question. Where is that at? I want to read it. Keith Chan. So AMC A70E, Keith Chan asked, or Chan Keith maybe, asked, how do we determine POF and COF for something like a meter installation project to meet legislative requirements? Major Jokin and a half is applauding this question. We are doing a lot of work. I'm gonna give you a really wishy-washy answer. I'm fired up about advanced metering and what our AFCEC CN team is doing to focus on metering and networking and all these things. So we're hoping to roll out. I know they're working hard on it. I'm kind of on the sidelines, an interested stakeholder, helping where we can. But they're trying to roll out something that we really get after, a deliberate long-range plan on advanced meters. That will likely. This is where we might have a focus fund, right there. That might give. If we decide advanced meters are going to make us money, we might take that off the top in the Pentagon early in the year and say, hey, we're going to get it. We're going to spend this money to get after meters, or buy it at the end of the year. That would be a focus fund. And if you want to get after that on a case by case to meet requirements that say, hey, when you do a renovation project, thou shalt also include advanced meters. So ideally, this project is going to score out already. I think what you're asking here is you already got an R&M project and you want to add meters onto it. So what I would say is, and again, I'm winging it here a little bit, looking at my team here in the room. If I were in your shoes, every one of your projects, our little project scoring worksheet, you're going to have some overhead costs that aren't part of your score. And I think we explained that in the business rules. If you've got compliance things, we've said that, A, when you do your builder inspection, if your control system or your alarm system doesn't meet UFC requirements, then we told you where to grade that on a scale of green plus to red minus, right? So if your alarms and controls are out of compliance with federal regulations, you can absolutely capture that in builder and that'll get you a good probability of failure. If this is kind of over and above that, we don't want them to include as overhead costs. That'd be, if you're adding controls, that'd be minor construction, I guess. Minor construction to do.
Theoretically, it would max out a meter install would max out a POF, right? If we're not complying with legislation, the key is going to be how it does on the consequence of failure. And can we articulate that up through the MAGCOM that we're not meeting this legislation, and I mean, that's going to be the key factor to determine whether we invest in it or not.
Great question, Air Mobility Command. Hopefully that's a good answer. What I would do is I'd get in the builder and say we don't comply with this mandate. We're red plus or red minus or whatever our matrix says. We can, and by the way, big Air Force, we're getting after advanced meters. We need to get to, you've heard about asset visibility, we need to get to energy visibility, right? We got to get after this. We've been talking about it too long. Somebody at the 86th asked when you're going to get details on environmental. You missed the web. You probably did miss the webinar. We did it in the middle of the day, which probably didn't help PACAF and USAFE because we were doing the AFIC green screen thing. It'll be up on the web tonight. And for USAFE, since we got a bunch of USAFE folks, if you want a USAFE specific EQ thing, you let us know. You send me an email, send Chuck Sear, CYR, our National Infrastructure AMP guy, an email. We'll do a USAFE only environmental thing. We don't want you to miss the boat. Hey, Joint Base Charleston, on builder assessor rights, yeah, we'll send us an email. We'll hook you up with Bill Hawkins, but they're giving assessor rights for folks who complete the Air Force training because we know USAFE slots are limited. We need to get your rights and get you going. All right, we done?
Yes. Emergent. Somebody said the Emergent Requirement website process link is not working. If that's the case, shoot me an email and we'll troubleshoot on a case-by-case.
She says it's not working right now. Captain Miles, should we assume that's operator error? Sorry, Kate, couldn't help it. Let us know if you're having trouble. Let us know. And maybe if a lot of people are having troubles, we'll have to get out a screenshot thing to tell everybody how to do it.
I'll
Right?
do some troubleshooting with our tech guys today. All right, I think that's it.
Hey, thanks team for joining in. Keep the feedback coming. We really want to make this better. And hey, guess what? I want to tell you something. Guess what we're working on now? FY16-17 business rules that we give you 6 months advance on instead of 6 weeks. Would that be good? Can I get a round of applause? We're going to try to take all these feedbacks, all these Hotwash things, everything you send us, and try to get out some business rules and give you lots of notice. Probably ask you to do some crazy things again, but lots of notice. So we didn't like the timeline either, folks. We're working on it.